Thank you, choir. We're all supposed to be at our best on Easter, and you certainly have been. Thank you for the hard work that you put in getting ready. I am not positive that I am at my best today. The North Carolina pollen has been getting the better of me for a couple of weeks now. So if you're the praying type, maybe offer one up for me here. There are several versions of what I'm about to read, but let's begin with this version of It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. Remember, it's only Friday, but Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Jesus was nailed on a cross, but it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Mary's crying her eyes out because her Jesus is dead. But it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. The disciples are running around like sheep without a shepherd. But it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. Pilate's strutting around washing his hands because he thinks he's got the power and won the victory. But it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday. People are saying, as things have been, so they will be. You can't change the world, but it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday, and evil is having its way, but it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It's Friday, and there is sadness and fear everywhere you look, but it's only Friday. Sunday's coming. It is Sunday, Congregational Church of Pinehurst, family who have gathered on this day. It is a Sunday, and we have gathered to tell our story as people of faith. And though we are in a mood to celebrate, our story begins with a word of caution. We must be careful when we stare into life, when we gaze at the world as it exists, because it looks a lot like Friday. There's plenty of fear out there, fear of one another, fear of the things that we need for life will run out, or that somebody will take what is ours, fear of what will happen next. It does look a lot like Friday if we're being honest. There is a war in Ukraine which is painful enough just to watch. Children who should be in school or playing on skateboards have been forced into the role of soldiers to defend their very homes. It's painful to watch, but for most of us, from our vantage point of safety, it is impossible to imagine what it must be like to be in the midst of it. But when we do look at it, it looks a lot like Friday. There are refugees whose faces are black and white and brown, roaming the earth in a nomadic search for a home. And even and especially people of goodwill are overwhelmed by this crisis. It does look a lot like Friday. The kind of political discourse which serves as the heartbeat of democracy and a primary tool of progress has become seemingly impossible. You are either with us or you are against us. You're either one of us or you're one of them has become the mantra of the political process. It looks a lot like Friday. So yes, even in the midst of Easter, even in the midst of the telling of our story, even in the midst of the Sunday celebration, there must be a word of caution. If we are to see Easter, if we are going to recognize resurrection, if we're going to see the tiny green sprouts of new life creeping through the hardened ground, we are going to need eyes to see it. Because make no mistake about it, at first glance, it looks like Friday. It might be helpful to know that if we struggle a bit to see Easter, to see the Sunday in it all, we are no different than those who started the celebration in the beginning. Now, I bet you Luke's version of the story probably made the patriarchal world in which he lived and moved and who read his words a bit uncomfortable. For you see, in Luke's version, the first proclamation of the story did not come from the apostles. The first proclaimers of the Easter story, the first to see those tiny green sprigs of new life, didn't have names like Peter and James and John. The first preachers to look back at the darkness of Friday and to begin to see the light of Sunday had names like Mary and Mary Magdalene and Joanna. These and other women went to the tomb to attend to the dead body of the man in whom they had placed their hopes and whom they had come to love. And what they found instead was an empty tomb. In just a few verses, they went from perplexed to frightened to hopeful. And once they had been imbued with enough hope, they went to the church. Oh, it wasn't really the church, but let's call it the church because they were acting like the church. They went to the disciples. They went to those soon to become the pillars of the church. They went to the church, and without fully knowing what they had seen, they told their story of seeing a tiny green sprig of new life breaking through the dry and hardened ground of their grief and despair. And the church responded this way. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. In a church I formerly served, I had a New Testament professor from the University of Elon as a member. She was great, always encouraging me, but she also had a way of keeping me on my toes. One Easter Sunday, I was preaching on this passage, and I quoted a commentator who suggested that the original Greek wording, which has been translated in English as "these words seem to be an idle tale," that they employed the words of Greek medical writers used to describe a fevered and insane mind. When the service was over, she complimented me on the service and with a smile said, "I know you've been out of seminary for a while and maybe you need to brush up on your Greek just a little bit. What you shared," she said, "was very polite but not completely accurate. If you want to convey to people how to translate they believed it to be an idle tale, the original Greek could better be described by saying that they had believed those words to be akin to something you might step in if you were following a horse too closely." I think that's plain enough, but it's not. Kathy Necton is our go-to horse person. She'll explain it later. They did not believe it. Perhaps they wanted to believe it, but they couldn't. Here's the thing, though. I take comfort in the fact that the early church struggled to understand what was going on, because now I can understand them. Because let's do some truth-telling here. We progressive Christians, we struggle a bit with stories like this. Can we admit to that? When dead bodies don't stay dead, it's hard to get our heads around that. Our scientific and educated minds just get in the way. But this is our story, so it is incumbent upon us to figure out a way to tell it and to stand on it and to proclaim it. Now, that's why you have me. That is why you have me, to tell you exactly what this story means. That is why you have me to tell you exactly what the original hearers of this story understood it to be. That is why the big bucks are electronically transferred into my bank account at the end of every month. Did you know that in some traditions on Easter Monday, God's people commit themselves to telling one another jokes? Clean jokes, questionable jokes, risque jokes, dad jokes. You see, we're supposed to laugh at Easter. We're supposed to laugh at Easter and the incongruence that you can't kill love. That's right. So if you get together with some friends tomorrow, tell some jokes. Well, I'm digressing here because I promised to tell you exactly what this story means. Are you ready? Yeah, I don't know. But I do have an idea. I have an image. It's that tiny green sprout. It's that thing that was growing in your backyard, and you got busy and didn't really take care of it the way you should, and then winter rolled in, and you were absolutely certain that you had seen the last of it. And then spring comes. The season of Easter comes, and that tiny green sprout starts pushing its way through the ground. That tiny green sprout is love. The kind of love which, even in the face of all the Friday stuff of the world, war and hatred and intolerance and fear and brokenness, is the kind of love which just won't die. That's the hope of the world. I love these words of Thomas à Kempis. And don't you worry about noises from children. I'm plenty loud enough. Don't worry about that. God bless them all. All of our children, God bless them. I love these words of Thomas à Kempis. Love feels no burden, thinks nothing of its trouble, attempts what is above its strength, pleads no excuse for impossibility, for it thinks for itself all things are possible. It's okay, and in fact, it is as it should be if the mystery of Easter and the mystery of the kind of love which is unkillable can't be contained in feeble human language, in my words. It's okay because we do know it when we see it. I want to share a story, and I believe even in our short time together that I have shared this one before. But I've been preaching long enough to know that some of you won't mind if I share it again. Some of you won't remember that I shared it the first time. And some of you weren't listening when I shared it. So bear with me. As I was growing up, my family moved around a lot because of my father's vocation. I think we counted 12 different homes in my 13 years of life. Now, I had a better childhood than most, I can tell you that, but there were times when it was difficult for my brother and I suppose for my parents as well, to be in that cycle of making new friends, making a place in a community, and then having to be uprooted again and do it all over. My grandparents, however, on my mother's side, lived in Atlanta, and they remained there in that home, in the same home, until in my adulthood their health required them to move. In some sense, their home became the hub of our lives. It became the constant. When I pictured a house in which I belonged, in which I had a real place, it was their home in Atlanta which came to mind. And each summer, we would travel to spend time with them. Friends might go to the beach or some other exotic destination. We just wanted to go to their home. Now, my grandfather, he was a hardworking man, but a bit hard to get to know. And I would come to know later in life that he had his reasons. My grandmother, on the other hand, was this quiet, strong, caregiving, loving woman who made the best spaghetti, always had Wrigley's chewing gum in her cabinet, and who could make every one of her grandchildren feel like they were her favorite. Truth was, I was her favorite. But I let the others believe what they needed to believe to get through the day. In one of our moves, we actually moved back close to Atlanta, in Roswell, Georgia, and were able to spend more time with them. One Saturday, I was playing in a youth league football game, and a referee made a call that went against our team. And all of a sudden, I heard one loud voice rising up above all the other voices in the stands, calling this referee's competence into deep question. I looked over into the stands, and there was my quiet, demure, Southern-mannered president of the Baptist Sewing Guild grandmother yelling at this referee at the very top of her lungs. Her love was tenacious, and she was passionate about those she cared for, especially her favorite grandchild. Well, every summer we did travel there to their home, and it seemed most of the time we arrived at night from wherever we were living at the time. They had one of those houses in which nobody ever used the front door. The driveway was in the back, and they had a garage with stairs which led up to the kitchen. When we arrived, we would climb those stairs into the kitchen where my grandmother awaited. The garage, it had a smell to it, a very distinct smell. It was a mixture of things, so I didn't know what to call it. There was the smell of gasoline. There was the smell of cut grass still clinging to the blades of the lawnmower. There was the smell of tools. The washing machine was down there, so mix in the smell of detergent. My grandfather, he always kept those steps freshly painted, and so there was always the smell of fresh paint in the air. It all blended together as we climbed those stairs to my grandmother. And I don't know what anyone else would have called it. I don't know what they would have called that smell. But it smelled like love to me. It was the scent of love. That scent, it lingers in my memory even today. Neither the passing of my grandparents, nor the passing of my mother, nor the passing of my father, nor the passing of time has diminished it or its presence in my soul. Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. I know that there is much in the world that looks and feels like Friday. But if we will listen to love's voice, if when love calls us to give sacrificially, we give. If when love's voice calls us to compromise, we give in. If when love's voice calls us to dig in our heels and stand up for truth and for justice, if then we plant our feet in the ground, if we embrace, enjoy, and proclaim a love which can't be killed, we will find that though it looks like Friday, my friends, my family, my church, my faith community, it may look like Friday, but know this: Sunday is coming. Amen.